and you will learn more about both the organizations during our webinar. We are super excited to have you in for the session today. Over 325 people signed up for today. That goes on to show the degree of interest people have. I'm sure most people who signed up are either intrigued by the topic of the webinar or what they've heard on news in the news so far, or maybe a combination of both. This webinar today will have two parts. First part will be a presentation that Rani will lead. It will be about for 40-45 minutes, in which we hope will cover the most fundamental questions, answer some basic concepts, and after that we'll have 15 minutes of Q&A. As you're listening to Rani's presentation, and if you have questions, just fire them off through the Q&A button right at the bottom of your Zoom screen. At the end, we will try to answer as many questions as possible, and hopefully you'll all find this session valuable. A couple of elements to keep in mind. You'll see that the chat is disabled and the other functions are not there. It's purposely designed to make sure that the webinar goes as per plan. We have a structured format. We'll be recording this session, so in case someone wants to listen to it after, just give us a shout out. With that in mind, let me hand over the meat of the discussion over to Rani, who's going to talk more about NFTs and why you guys are here. So Rani, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you again for everyone to join us today. It's really exciting to see so many of you interested in NFTs and blockchain. We've been playing around with the technology for a few years now, so it's fun to see more people join us. So we will cover, let me get the slides going. We will cover three things during this session. We'll do an introduction to NFTs. We'll learn more about what they are and what they're used for. We'll also look at the interplay between copyright and NFTs, and we'll examine and consider whether we're dealing with something that's going to be with us for a long time and bring value into the future, or whether this is only hype. And as Sapin said, we'll answer questions at the end of the presentations. So many of you know who I am, but just very quickly, my name is Roanne Levy, and I'm President and CEO of Access Copyright and Prescient Innovations. I've been championing creative rights for well over 20 years, and I would say in the last 5 or 6 years, I've been really intrigued and fascinated about the world of decentralized and how decentralized economies are going to reshape creative industries as well as other industries. And working towards building the ecosystem and bringing like-minded partners together in order to ensure that as this new technology evolves, it evolves in the interest of creators and publishers of rights. So a little bit, for those that don't know us, a little bit about Access Copyright. Access Copyright is a copyright management organization. We've been around for over 30 years. We ensure that creators are fairly paid when their works are used. We deal with text-based work, so textbook, trade books, newspapers, journals, magazine, that kind of works. We aggregate the rights to those works, and then we redistribute, we license it out, and then we redistribute the royalties back to creators and publishers. In the time that we've been around, we've distributed well over $350 million back to creators and publishers. We act as the collective voice of creators, and essentially we're experts in rights management. And a little bit about Prescient Innovation. Prescient is the innovation arm of Access Copyright, and we are essentially working with other creative associations, industries, and creators themselves as we explore exponential technologies like blockchain and machine learning in order to build dynamic ecosystem that reimagine content interactions. Prescient Innovation has the same DNA as Access Copyright. We ensure that creators are fairly paid for the use of their works and that users get access to trusted content. So that was a bit about Access Copyright and Prescient, essentially the host of this webinar today. Now to the meat. What are NFTs? As Sapin said, NFTs is the newest tech sensation. It's been in the news quite a bit in the last few months. And the question is all of this attention merited? Are we going to look back a few years from now and think, what NFSFC, what was that? What do you guys remember what that was? Or are we going to look back and realize that the NFTs was in fact the killer app that took blockchain mainstream? So this is some of the questions that we're going to be examining today. So some of the news, of course, the most exciting news, the one that drew the most attention, was the Beebles digital art sale that sold for $69 million. And it wasn't a fly-by-night startup that made the sale. It was, in fact, a well-established art auction house, Christie's, that managed and orchestrated the sale of the NFT for Beebles digital art. Another thing that is noteworthy about this event is that it was the third highest auction price for a living artist work. So there were lots of reasons there to pay attention. But then there were some more trivial things that were also sold for incredible sums of money. There was an NFT of Jack Dorsey's first tweet. Jack Dorsey is the CEO of Twitter, that sold for almost $3 million. And this is a tweet that anybody can see at any time, that's been out there for years, and it's NFT sold for almost $3 million. And you've got also the Nyan Cat GIF that it's been around for 10 years that sold for $630,000. And it's not just individuals and one-offs. We're also seeing more deliberate and consistent approach to NFTs. The example here on this slide is the NBA's foray into NFTs with Top Shot. They're essentially packaging little video clips with a little bit of more media attached to it into NFTs and using them like trading cards. They're calling them moments. And they've, in the last few months, have had sales of $338 million since October of 2020. And there are many, many more NFTs, NFT drops. That's when there's a launch of an NFT. It's called a drop. So there are many more NFT drops being announced every day. And you'll note that I've been referring to the sale of an NFT for an artwork and not the artwork itself. And we'll explain that a little bit more in a second. So as we go through the presentation, I invite you to consider and to think about some higher level questions first. Are we at the precipice of a fundamental shift in societal perceptions of experiences and ownership? Are these going to be revolutionary tools that will empower artists and reshape the creative economy? Or is this nothing more than technology that will be leveraged for fraudulent and speculative purposes with negative effect on the environment and mood? So these are the high level questions you probably all have been asking yourselves. We're also going to answer in this presentation a few more deeper or pointed questions. Is this real or hype? What does this mean from the perspective of copyright and ownership? As a creator, what does this mean for you? Will it open up new revenues opportunities or will it limit them? And should you get involved? And if you want to get involved, how should you get involved? Before getting into the meat of NFTs themselves, there are two concepts that we need to spend a little bit of time explaining: blockchain and fungible or non-fungible. What are those concepts? What is that about? So first, on blockchain. Blockchain is essentially the coming together of three technologies that we've had for a very, very long time. So P2P, which is peer-to-peer, Napster, BitTorrent, cryptography, and behavioral economics. And they've come together in a novel way to create what people are defining as the trust layer on the internet. What I've got up on the screen is a definition that I quite like, but it is very compact, so we're going to unpack it a little bit in the next slide. So in essence, blockchain is a shared, programmable, cryptographically secure, and therefore trusted ledger which no single user controls and which can be inspected by anyone. So as I warned you, it's pretty dense definition. A ledger is essentially a database. It's protected by cryptography. The information in the database is programmable. So that's something that is more than just a regular database. And it's shared and no single user control. It could be inspected by lots of people. Another definition I'm going to share with you, it may be a little bit more technical, but may appeal to some people on the call. This is the definition by the International Standards Organization. Distributed ledger with confirmed blocks organized in a append-only sequential chain using cryptographic links. So I did warn you there too, it is a more technical definition, but it's the official ISO definition. Blocks refer to a package of transactions that come together and are packaged together in a block. And then the computers on the network will use a consensus mechanism in order to validate that block. And that block will be connected to the next block in a sequential way. And there will be information on block 3 from block 2, on block 4 from block 3. And so in this way, these blocks are chained together, hence the term blockchain. And this chaining adds a level of protection that goes beyond just the cryptography, which is also used for each individual block. So what are the characteristics of blockchain? The first one is that it's transparent. So all of the blockchain participants are able to view the data in the chain. And as a result of that, there is a lot more trust in the data integrity, and there's a single source of truth for the data. When I say all blockchain participants, I should specify that it depends on the blockchain in terms of who the participants are. So in a public blockchain, such as Ethereum, which is where most of the NFTs are minted, are living, that is a public blockchain, and anybody, the world, all of the public can see the information that is put onto the blockchain. But then you could have private blockchain where only a select group of participants are able to see the information. So there's both public and private blockchains, as well as these weird mergers of the two. The transparency establishes trust, and that's the trust in the data that is on the blockchain that is created. And thanks to both the transparency and the trust, a lot of people will speak about disintermediation, where established players whose function has been to build the trust, such as a financial institution, verifying whether there is money in somebody's account before allowing a transaction to go through, that kind of intermediation is going to get disintermediated as a result of blockchain. And as you probably realize by now, the transparency, the trust also creates a very auditable trail. We speak about, as I mentioned already, append only. That means information that's on the blockchain cannot get erased. It can only, you can only append new information to say, oh, that information that was on block 462, well, is now being changed to the information that's on block 3667. So it's an append only database. And so you get an audit trail of all of the changes that are being made to any given transaction. So information on the blockchain is immutable and everlasting. And so it creates an exhaustive means of record keeping. NFTs is essentially a use case for a blockchain. It's just one blockchain use case. So now for the concept of fungibility. Fungibility is like this really, really old word that has become new again and very popular. Fungibility refers to the ability of something to be substituted for something else, as well as being divisible. So the most common example that is given is currency, money. So if I owe you $50, you really don't care which $50 bill I use to pay my debt back, nor do you care whether it's $5 $10 bills or 220 and a 10. And that's because money can be substituted, it is fungible, and I could divide it as well. A lot of commodities are being transacted on as if they were fungible. Non-fungibility, well, it's the opposite of fungibility. It is actually something that cannot be replaced by another asset, and it is also not divisible. Doesn't mean it can't be owned by more than one person, but the asset in and of itself is not divisible. That's a non-fungible token. And of course, art is often referred to as non-fungibility. As an example, the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, there's only one like it. There may be millions of posters of the Mona Lisa, perhaps perfect reproductions of it as well, of the Mona Lisa, but only the Mona Lisa in the Louvre has the value as being the Mona Lisa and associated monetary value to that. So that's the concept of non-fungibility. So putting those two together, blockchain and fungibility, we get NFTs. And NFTs is essentially a digital file with a unique identifier stored on a digital ledger called the blockchain that certifies an asset to be unique and therefore not interchangeable. So NFTs are unique and distinguishable representations of a digital or physical asset. It could refer to something that exists online or it's something that exists in the real world, such as a house, as an example. You cannot interchange one NFT for another NFT. They're all unique. And you cannot sell parts of the NFT. You could co-own it with many people, but you cannot sell parts of the NFT. Again, to note, it's a digital file with a unique identifier. Okay, a little bit more about the characteristics of an NFT, why it's so interesting. So think of an NFT as a certificate of ownership of a physical or digital asset. So it's a digital version of a certificate. You could think of it as a cryptographically signed receipt that you own something, okay? And it's the receipt. It is not the something that you own, it's just the receipt that's cryptographically protected and on a blockchain that you own something. More often than not, it is not the object that it points to, even if we're dealing with a digital asset. It is usually just the metadata about the digital asset, if we're talking about a digital asset, that is hashed together with the original work. So it's a hash of the original work with the metadata about the work and a pointer to where the work is located elsewhere. We talk about the elsewhere being off-chain. So the NFT is on-chain, on a blockchain, and the digital asset that it's referring to, especially when we're talking about creative works, which is our main focus today. The creative work, the digital asset is off-chain, and it's just a digital pointer to that asset. Occasionally, the NFT will actually also include the asset, not just the hash of the asset, but the asset itself. But that is very rare. And the reason why it's rare is because putting a lot of information on the blockchain is very expensive. So unless you have a very, very small, basic piece of artwork, it's probably too costly to put the asset itself on the blockchain. The process of creating an NFT, of taking the digital asset, hashing it with metadata, and creating a pointer for it is called minting, the minting of an NFT. And the common feature as well of an NFT is that it's code. And because it's code, it is programmable. And the beauty about something which is programmable is that you can make it do something given certain events. You can use it to unlock other benefits for the NFT owner. So that's something to really think about. And it could be something such as royalty payments for when the NFT transfers hands. The royalty payment can go back to the creator, or there could also be a share of royalty payments if something was to happen with the digital assets back to the NFT owners. And as I mentioned, this is a blockchain-based asset, the NFT is, and therefore the chain of custody as the NFT changes hands is recorded on the blockchain in a permanent, tamper-evident manner. All right. So with those characteristics, what people will talk about is that we're redefining the concept of scarcity, particularly in the digital world. So as I said, NFTs can refer to anything real or intangible. And when we're dealing with creative works and digital creative works, we are creating something that people are now referring to as digital original. Now, that is an invented word. There's no such thing, as you all know, of a digital original. Like, there is no such thing as a digital original. But the NFT is able to identify an owner as being the one and only owner of the original digital version of a work. It could be one, or it could be one of many, such as in a limited series edition. Again, you have to remember, this is probably obvious to everybody on the call, but it's worth kind of calling it out. It's an artificial scarcity, because there are and are likely to be many, many, many more versions of the digital work available online for others to consume. And so the scarcity to a quote unquote digital original is really artificial. When you buy an NFT, you hold the right to claim ownership of the NFT itself, and the right to exclude others from claiming ownership of the NFT. So the ownership is of the NFT. Beyond that, beyond owning the NFT, it will really depend on the terms that govern the NFT sale, and I'll come to that in a moment. The tracking, the transferring of the NFT from one owner to the other is tracked on the blockchain, as I've said already, and this is the verified ownership. And that provides an immutable chain of provenance, which in itself could have quite a bit of value, and we'll go through some examples. Okay, examples of NFTs. So you could have NFTs, like we've classified them into two groups. There are some NFTs that are just collectibles, like they provide nothing more to the owner of the NFT than the pride of ownership, the ability to say, I am the owner of the NFT for this asset. And there are other NFTs that actually provide utilities. Sometimes we refer to them as attributes that actually provide an additional benefit to the owner of the NFT. So example of collectibles are the NBA Top Shot moments that I've mentioned. The LeBron James, their example is from the moments. The Beebles NFT that sold for $69 million, that's an example of just a collectible. I shouldn't say just, it was worth $69 million. And the CryptoKitties are also examples of collectibles. On the side of utilities, this is where things get really interesting. One of the examples we put up there is the Kings of Leon, which is a musical band that have done an NFT drop, and essentially they've raised 1.4 million through the sale of NFT tokens. And the most valuable of the token provided the owner with front row seats to all of the band's concerts for life. So imagine if back in the day, the Grateful Dead had an NFT for that provided front row seats to the band's concert, what it would be, how it would have traded, and how it would have increased in value. So this is an interesting example of a utility attached to an NFT. There are some sports example out there. Sorare is a fantasy football game, and so the different NFTs have different values in this fantasy football game. And there's also another example of DJ Blau, who is another musical artist, who has done an NFT drop. He raised $11.7 million through the drop, and the most valuable of the token, which sold for almost $4 million, provided the owner of the NFT with the ability to collaborate with Blau on a future song. So again, interesting examples of how NFTs and the programming in the NFT can lead to new ways of connecting with fans and monetizing your work. So there are lots of use cases. New ones are appearing in the news every day. We've talked about some in the art. Again, this is for digital art, but also for physical art. Fashion is one where we're seeing a lot of use cases. For example, an NFT that is connected to a Louis Vuitton bag so that you could ensure that you got an authentic Louis Vuitton bag. That is being worked on right now. But also in the digital world, there are fashion examples where furniture designers are creating designers, so digital assets, for games where you can trade and furnish your virtual home. Real estate, both for physical and digital real estate, so a plot of land in a digital game. And the beauty about these game assets is that they will be and they are transferable between games in the same ecosystem. And of course, enabling, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of them, but of course, NFTs can open up the door. They could be programmed to open up the door to both digital experiences, but also to real world experiences, as we have seen with the examples I just gave. So really the fascinating part is when we start tracking things that we've been exchanging as fungible, simply because it's the easiest way to track those assets, and starting to track and extract the variances between assets, whether it's place of origin, who used the asset, who previously owned the asset, and that value is able to be tracked and moved along with the asset and be traded on in the future or through NFTs. So right now, NFTs are mostly being used as investments. Their valuations fluctuating based on demand. But we're going to see more and more NFTs that are being purchased and being traded based on the utility that is attached to the NFT. All right, but it's not all rosy. There are some issues. As I mentioned, blockchain and NFTs is supposed to be the trust machine. It is what is supposed to bring trust back to the internet. And the question is it really doing that? Predictably, when you've got something that anybody can go on and create an NFT, it has been quite a bit of abuse. So lots of spammers and infringers in particular, simply because anybody can create an NFT and there's actually no checks in place to ensure that the person, the entity creating an NFT is in fact entitled to do so. And that's a problem that has plagued the creative economy since the dawn of the internet. There is no check between the content creators and the digital services to ensure that when someone is uploading a work to a digital service, that and they tick off the I own the copyright box, that they in fact do own the copyright box. And so this misplaced trust is what we're calling misplaced trust, is not actually allowing us to deliver on the promise of blockchain. But and the reason for that is that in a digital environment, in order to have reliable transactions, there are 5 things that need to stay connected or be connectable in a persistent way to each other. There is the digital asset itself, so that the creative work in its digital representation, identifiers about the creative work so that we can know, computers can know what is being moved around, metadata about the work, rights holders information, and rights information related to the work and the uses that can be made of it. And right now, these things there is no link. These things are often not connected to each other, or some are connected, but not all 5. The links are broken. And the technology that's available today, including blockchain, is in fact an opportunity to relink these together, to make sure that there is a way to link those 5 pieces together. And it's what we call solving for the attribution problem. It would include a ledger, or I should say ledgers, or a network of ledgers, linked identifiers, a governance structure to figure out how to bring this all together and to deal as well with a dispute resolution. And that approach would start bringing all of these 5 items together so that when something gets minted, when a work gets minted, there is a check against this system in order to ensure that the rightful owner is actually doing the minting. It's, as I said, something we're calling the attribution problem. We have been working on an attribution ledger to start solving for this problem and been working with others as well. And so we're excited and happy to speak to you more about it. So now from NFTs and copyright. So before we go into whether copyright and NFTs is a happy marriage or not, I think it's important to go through the basics of copyright. This is probably known and well understood by everyone on this call, but it's worth just highlighting them so they're present in our mind as we talk about NFTs and copyright some more. So copyright is automatic. Generally, the creator is the first owner of copyright, but of course things changes if you're in a situation of employment or work for hire, freelancer, you got to look at the contract, or if there's more than one copyright creator, one creator of the works, things get more complicated very quickly. Copyright is not one thing that moves around. In this way, it's actually quite fungible. It's a bundle of rights that is divisible. Can be owned by different people at different times, in different jurisdictions, for different uses. It includes the right of reproduction, making available, communication to the public performance, and adaptation. So it's a hugely fragmented right. It also includes the moral rights, which is the right of attribution and the right of integrity. And that is a right that is exclusive to the author and its successor, that in many countries it cannot be waived, although in Canada it can be waived, but it most certainly cannot be assigned to somebody else. Copyright as well is national, which essentially means that there is a different Copyright Act in every single jurisdiction, and there are variations between the rights in the different jurisdictions. And of course, owning the creative work, owning the book or the painting does not equate to owning the copyright in the creative work. Okay, so what does this mean for copyright and NFT? Let's start with who can create an NFT. Who can legally mint an NFT? So it's the copyright owner that can mint the NFT. And when it's a work that is created by an independent individual creator who hasn't used anybody else's work in order to create his or her work, then the answer is very simple. That person can mint the NFT. But as soon as you're dealing with more than one author, or that you've assigned some or all the rights or licensed some or all the rights to somebody else for monetization, perhaps you've made an assignment of your right to a record label, for example, then you need to look at your contract to determine who has the right to mint the NFT. And again, to remember, copyright is hyper fragmented, and that doesn't always sit very well with the concept of NFT, which is borderless, impersonal, and automated. So how does an NFT that can be transferred globally work well with copyrights that are administered in a very fragmented way? So partly coexist, NFTs partly coexist with copyright and partly conflict. Of course, let's not forget about moral rights. As I said, the creator even if the copyright moves around, the creator always remains the creator, and the right to integrity and the right to attribution stays with the creator. In some jurisdictions, as I said, it could be waived, but in many jurisdictions, such as in most countries in Europe, it cannot be waived. So how does an NFT, what happens with the owner of an NFT and the rights that are potentially assigned to an NFT with respect to copyright? Another point that is worth mentioning is that if there is an assignment of copyright in almost all jurisdictions, or certainly in Canada and the US, and I think most of Europe, the assignment has to be in writing and signed. And it's not clear how that fits with a on-chain transfer of rights through a transfer of an NFT, whether that qualifies as a signed written assignment of copyright. And what are the rights of the NFT? So we talked about who can mint an NFT. How about what happens when you purchase an NFT? What are your rights? Well, here the thing to remember most is that you absolutely need to read the fine print. An NFT includes essentially a certificate of ownership, and what you own is the ownership of the NFT. But in most instances, although as I said, it's dependent on the contract, it excludes access to the work or exclusive access to the work or copyright in the work. But it's the terms of the NFT that will determine that. And if you were to explore some NFTs that are out there, whether it's the NBA Top Shop NFT or the terms on Mintable, they're very, very different. So typically, an NFT can be owned, sold, lent, and transferred. That's the NFT. And typically, the work underlying the NFT cannot be commercialized by the NFT owner, reproduced, communicated, etc., or no derivative works can be created of it either. A lot of times as well, we see on many NFT platforms the ability for the person minting the NFT to provide as well for a royalty that would come back to the creator when there is a transfer of sale of the NFT. So other consideration, as we've mentioned, generally the NFT does not include the work itself. The work is somewhere else, online, on a database, proprietary or not. If that link gets broken, if that work gets removed, then the NFT is potentially worth nothing. It is possible to program into the NFT royalty payments. There are a lot of data protection laws that require personal data to be able to be erased and corrected. And as I mentioned, when something is on the blockchain or in an NFT, is there forever. And so you got to be very judicious about the type of data that you put on an NFT. And we've mentioned piracy in terms of IP rights and NFTs that we're seeing, but also you need to think about the right to personality, trademarks, as well, or other consideration when you're looking at NFTs. So hype or reality. This is the Gartner hype cycle. It's a graphical depiction of a common pattern that arises with each new technology. Something to keep in mind is that the timeline is not to scale. Depending on the technology, it's either a stretch or it's condensed. In terms of where we're at with the evolution of NFTs, we're very, very early in the adoption and even development of NFTs. Think of the internet today and the internet in the late 90s. In terms of NFT blockchain technology, we're like in the late 90s. So there's a lot of development and growth ahead of us. And we're not even at the peak of inflated expectations. So there is more hype ahead of us as well. So the technology is early stage, but as we can see, it's already good enough for a lot of interesting use cases. The user experience is still very complicated, but it's improving. And it's not a panacea for digital creations. There is an environmental impact. It is an issue. It is due to the consensus mechanism, but there are blockchains that have different consensus mechanism that require less in energy. And the Ethereum blockchain, where most of NFTs reside right now, is also moving to that kind of blockchain. A lot of the projects, NFT projects that you're going to see, also announce their carbon offset strategies in order to deal with the environmental impact. So quickly, the key takeaways. It provides for new monetization. This is the good, new monetization opportunities. It's a potential solution for digital original, and we'll see how over time what that actually means. And it's an opportunity to create, to connect creators with their fan base directly. On the bad side, NFTs are code. The underlying metadata and the content to which it points to can disappear. There's a lot of speculation, and there are some negative environmental impact. And for the bad, there is money laundering, that this is a problem like it was with the internet, still is with the internet, so that's still there. There are a lot of pump and dump schemes, so buyer beware. And there's a lot of piracy happening right now. And with that, this is where I'm going to end the presentation, but before going to questions and answer, we're going to do a quick poll. So Sapin, can you help me out here? All right. So please answer NFT. What's your views? Fad or future? Wow. Let's give it a couple more seconds to see where it lands.
It's a close fight.
Yes. I think we're good now. Sapin, can you share the results or can everybody see this?
Yeah. Let me end the poll and do a share result.
Okay. So the winner is not sure. So lots of people who are intrigued, maybe, but watching carefully. Close second is, yeah, it's the future. It's here to stay. Not sure in what format, I guess, but it's here to stay. And there is 16% that believe that it's fad. And in 5 years, we're going to be wondering what the NFT stood for. So thank you for participating in the poll. And why don't we move to one last slide. Maybe you could remove the poll. I don't know if, can you remove the poll?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's on my end. I think it's on my end. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. One last thought to share with you before we move to questions. So what next? I know that this quote is overused at this point, but I think it's so appropriate for this technology. And this is a quote by Bill Gates. We always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. Don't let yourself be lulled into inaction. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. We're also going to put in the chat the email address for myself and Sapin in case you want to reach out to us and discuss anything or have some ideas you'd like to discuss. Please feel free to reach out to us. So Sapin, do we have questions?
We have a lot of good questions, and I think let's first start with two questions which are almost in the same domain area. So I'm going to read out the question. I think the first one says, on the question of is this real, people often ask question whether or not sports stars are worth the salary they get. The answer seems to be they are worth whatever the market will pay for them. Since we know there's an established market for created content, could NFT technology be used to create similar equations for artists that sports stars enjoy today? So that's one question. And there's another one which is in the...
Why don't I answer that one?
Yeah.
In many ways, the answer was in the question. And the answer is also in the example of the Beeple art auction, where an artist that was known but only in a very niche area was able to command an incredible price for his artwork. And certainly the market demand will be able to determine what the value is.
The next one I think is also quite interesting one is, are there ways in which an average creator can make NFT, or is this only for the likes of NBAs and the Beeples and Christies?
No, absolutely. Actually, it's not that complicated to mint an NFT. There are many NFT marketplace. So go on NFT marketplace. OpenSea's, Mintable are examples of NFT marketplace, and they'll walk you through the process of minting your work. But then, of course, you're just going to end up in a sea, in a big marketplace with lots and lots and lots of different, if it's artwork, different art being minted, and you're going to have to do the hard work of marketing it to draw attention to your work so that you could sell it for a reasonable price, or a price that's worth your while.
Then there are two questions which touched on other similar topics is, I'm an author. Do I need my publisher's permission to create NFT for my book? And the second one similar to that is, I have a lot of paintings. Can someone just take a copy of my painting, pretend to be me, and create an NFT? And do I get compensated for it or not? So
Okay.
similar areas of question for
Yeah.
these.
So first, you're an author. You have a book. You have a publisher. That means you did something with your rights. You didn't keep all the rights. Can you mint your own book? And the question to that is, it depends on your contract. So I would certainly, if I was you, make sure that you have the rights to mint the NFT. So go back to your contract, and if you're not sure, maybe you want to have a discussion with your publisher about whether or not you could go ahead or experiment together about the opportunities around minting. So always go back. There's one example I wanted to mention is. There is some people, some big copyright owners like Marvel Comics have sent out letters to all of their creators, reminding them that they do not own the copyright to be able to mint the designs and the images that they make. So definitely, this is all regulated. Most of this is going to be regulated by your contracts. So you need to go back to your contract. Now, as I said, there are a lot of pirated NFTs out there because bots are going out there scouring the internet, lifting URLs and images and minting them. And in most instances, they are not attributing that work to you. They are attributing it to themselves. And if it gets sold, they're pocketing the money. So right now, what you need to do is what we do with any piracy of your work online. You need to go to these sites. If you find it, you need to issue notice and takedowns to deal with the infringing works that are out there.
Yeah. Next one is another two-part question, which is that does it matter where the jurisdiction in which the NFT is created and the jurisdiction in which NFT is bought? And the second element on that similar line of thought is, are the laws in US, Canada in its current state apt for dealing with the legal issues with NFTs? What's your opinion on that?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. The act of minting doesn't, in order to create, so first of all, a reproduction of your work will find its way onto a website, right? Because the NFT is going to connect to it's going to link to a reproduction of the work. And that reproduction is going to have been made in a jurisdiction or accessible in a jurisdiction. So there, depending on where the infringement takes place, is where the law that applies. So it's a complicated answer, as it is with the internet. If you could access the work, depending on where the server is, where the work is where the jurisdiction of where the law is going to apply. Is it apt? There are a lot of open questions. In some ways, it works just fine, and in other ways, it actually doesn't work at all. We talked about the assignment of copyright, for example. I'm not sure that the conditions for assignments are met by an NFT transfer, for example.
A lot of questions on the legal rights and other elements, and there are a bunch of them, and I'll just refer to each one of them in sequence, and we can answer them in parts. First is around when we have more than one people who have the copyright, how do we ensure that the people who are creating NFTs, it consists of all the appropriate parties? The second one on that similar line is, where
Okay.
do we sign
When
a?
did times happen? Just
Yeah.
wanted to, okay. Yes, this is where it gets complicated very, very quickly in terms of identifying who's able to mint an NFT and whether or not you have all the rights necessary to be able to mint an NFT. So if you're dealing with more than one copyright owner, you need to make sure that you have the authorization from all of the copyright owners to be able to mint the NFT.
Next one is, I find that NFT of my work has been created without my permission. What do I do? What are the rights that we have?
Yeah, so a lot of the marketplaces where NFTs are circulating have actually provided notice and takedown procedures. So go to the marketplace where you found your work being minted, where it's been minted or available for sale, and file a DMCA notice and take down with them.
The next theme of question is around pricing, and people have appropriately found differ to say that there is price to create an NFT and there is a price that the buyer pays. The question is more around, when we create NFT, who is the paying party? Is it the copyright holder, the person who is minting,
Yeah.
all the parties, the publisher in this case of specific question?
Okay. So it's the person who is minting, whoever that person is, whether it's the creator or the publisher, or whether it's someone that's doing it without the rights. The person who is minting will need to, in order to mint, use usually it's cryptocurrency, but there are some platforms that will allow you to use your credit card and they will do the exchange, the crypto exchange behind the scenes. But generally, you actually have to use cryptocurrency in order to mint the work. And depending on the size of the work, it could be anywhere between $50 or, a few $100s, depending on the size of the work and depending on what the value of if their ether is at that point when you're minting. Okay, so it's not nothing, but it is not so expensive that it's not worth experimenting with. So that's the price for the minting. And then the person who buys the work, the person who buys, not the work, correct myself, the person who buys the NFT will also generally, again, you have to use cryptocurrency in order to buy it. But again, some platforms have the credit card option where the crypto happens behind the scene. And then just like any marketplaces, generally the marketplace will retain a royalty fee or a transaction fee, and the rest of the money will go to the person who minted the work.
I think the next question is similar to say, why does it cost to create an NFT? Or
Yeah.
why is the cost so high as well, which is the second one?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think depending on the blockchain that is being used, the cost will be different. So there is a cost to using the blockchain. That is really important. This is why there's an environmental impact, in fact. So the way blockchain is secured is through it's through a network of computers that actually do work. And there's different ways they do work to build a consensus around what is the block that we should trust. And that work, in exchange for doing that work, there is a payment that goes to this network or the person that succeeded in doing that work. And so that payment is what is costing, what it costs to mint something. And different blockchains have different consensus mechanisms, and they have different ways of paying those that are supporting or protecting or making the blockchain work. And so that payment varies depending on the blockchain that you're using. Most NFTs right now are on the Ethereum blockchain. The Ethereum blockchain uses proof of work, which is a very energy intensive work. And the miners, and it uses, in order to mint, it uses gas, what is called gas. And gas are essentially ether that you have to pay for. And there's a lot of speculation, and it goes up and it goes down. And so it costs money to mint.
I There's a set of questions which somehow mix the concept of registering a copyright or registering a proof of creation and the act of creating an NFT and what we do with it. Maybe it's worth a while
Hmm.
helping people distinguishing the concept between proof of creation versus creating an NFT and the tradable nature that comes with it.
So it's just, you want to just talk about that? There's no
Yeah,
specific question?
exactly. I think there's a set of questions as an example. Can I use a manuscript before I send to the publisher to confirm that I am the owner of the manuscript? Can the works be created similar so that people know that I'm the creator before they are bought? So there's a sort of a mixing of the concept of confirming the ownership and creating an NFT.
Okay, so um, as you all know, you do not need to register a copyright in order, you don't need to register your work or register your copyright in order to be protected under copyright. So that's the first thing. So you don't need to register. But in order to prove that you are the copyright owner, it's almost like you want to demonstrate that you were the first one to write that book. Like anybody else that has the same book after that probably copied it from you. You were the first one. So it's almost like a time stamping. And a blockchain and NFTs as a consequence are an excellent time stamping machine. But that's all it is. It is just a time stamping machine. It doesn't actually say that you were the one that wrote the book. It just says you were the first one to get it to the timestamp, but you could have lifted it from somebody else. We don't know that. Okay. So the registration on the blockchain, all it does is it gives you a timestamp as to when you registered it, but it doesn't confirm that you are the owner of the work, or you are the actual creator, I should say, of the work.
We are 3 minutes in and we'll answer just three questions. There are a total of 64 questions sitting in our mailbox, so we are not going to answer all of them today. But there are questions around tax, securities, and I don't think we have enough time or the right
But if
expertise on that.
I could
Yeah.
just say one thing is, yes, when we had that slide on other considerations, we probably should have added securities as well. Because depending on how you set up your NFT is like I said, it's programmable. So it's like, we also, when we talk about blockchain, we often talk about smart contracts. Another area in blockchain that's very hot is DeFi, distributed finance, which is essentially smart contracts for financial instruments. And you could imagine that if you have, for example, joint ownership of a work that generates royalties, that it is like a security and that you might be subject to securities laws. So that is something to think about as you consider how you may want to use this technology.
Uh, there are a lot of questions by authors, specifically self-published authors. A couple have asked that I'm a self-published author. I want to create an NFT. Do I need to know how to write code? How easy or difficult is that process?
Yeah, it's not difficult. It's not difficult, and it won't take you very long to figure it out. It's still like the user interface and the process is not as simple as going on Amazon and buying something, but it's not that much more difficult either. You do need to buy some cryptocurrency. That is the only perhaps more difficult part. But if you go to a marketplace that does that for you, then it's a fairly simple process to be able to mint a work. But that is just the beginning. Then you end up on a marketplace where there are thousands of works, just like yours, with a price tag attached to it. Then the challenge becomes, how do I get someone to buy that work?
There's another element or request to say that if we want to explore more use cases, where do we go? And the answer to that is start with us. We are
That's
right here on the call. You know our contact information, and we'll be happy to sit down with you and discuss this more.
Yeah, if you're interested, we could put a list of resources together and send those to those that ask. I find, obviously, as you can tell, I find this area absolutely fascinating. I think it's exciting to feel like we're at the beginning of something new. Back in the 90s, I was around and I was working. I did not have the foresight to see where the internet might bring us. And I feel that we are at that point again with blockchain technology. People talk about a new layer of the internet being built on top of the existing internet. It's exciting, it's fascinating. Go down the rabbit hole, read, watch videos, learn about the technology. I'm sure that it will blow your mind about what the opportunities may be.
Okay. And the very last question, people are curious about your response to the poll.
Uh,
Real, fad, I don't know.
I think it's the future. I think it's the future.
Amazing. So, with that in mind, we are dot on time at 4. Thank you, everyone who attended. At the peak of it, we had 225 people who were live on the session. So, a lot of good interest and attendance. We really appreciate everyone joining in. For the people who want to go back and listen to this presentation, we'll figure out a way to make the recording available and see some communication from our end if you're curious about it. But thank you so much, everyone, for attending today and for being amazing participants and sending some great questions to us. Thank you.
Bye now.